My name is Charlene Margot, co-founder and CEO of nonprofit The Parent Venture. We are delighted to have with us tonight Anna Homayoun and Allia Griffin for High School 101, helping students prepare for a successful high school experience. Please take it away, Anna and Allia.
Well, thank you so much for having us, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. We're so excited to be here, and this is one of my favorite topics. So we're going to get started. We'll go through a lot, and I wanted to just quickly say, instead of talking about who we are, because you've all got our bios, I was going to have us each tell what we're going to talk about. So my work is really with middle school, high school, and college students around executive functioning. So organizing, planning, prioritizing, being able to start and complete tasks, being able to think flexibly, being able to know when you need help, right? These are really important skills that we know tie into long-term success. So my work is really about what are the ways that we can help students within high school create their best personal blueprint for success. So I'll give you some strategies tonight. And then I'll let Allia say what she's going to share, because her perspective is incredibly important.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm really thrilled to be here. So my perspective that I want to share is really thinking about what does the college classroom look like, and what are the skills and practices that you can help your high school student develop early on and become comfortable with so that they can be successful in a college classroom. So I'm thinking about a lot of the skills that students can develop as high school students and practice in a high school setting that will be really essential for their success in a college classroom.
And not just in a college classroom, but beyond, because we know that a lot of times we overlook, one of the things that we've been working on right now, I've been working on a new book, is around this idea of erasing the finish line of college admissions being this only finish line, and really thinking about what are the skills that we need for long-term success. So here's the roadmap of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing now. This is a really unique time. I'm sure you've all heard that, you've seen that. We have been at the forefront of seeing this because we work directly with students in our office, and we work with students around the country and on 3 continents. So our office is located in downtown Los Altos, but we have that experience. And there are some really important parallels of things that we're seeing that are unique and amplified in this time. So I think it's really important for parents and caregivers to know that they're not alone, their child is not alone. And then we're going to talk about 5 specific strategies. And then encompassing that, we'll give you tools and tips for each one, right? And then, of course, we'll leave time for Q&A. So be sure to add your questions to the Q&A section so we can get through as many of those as possible. So I think it's important to start with where we are in this moment. So many of our students spent 1 to 2 years primarily learning online. They may have been remote for 5 months. They may have been remote for 6 months. They may have been remote for over a year, right? Every student's experience is different. But what we did find is that coming back to the classroom in person all the time, we're seeing a lot of impact on, first of all, managing potential distractions, right? So when they were on Zoom, it was so easy to be having 10 tabs open. It was easy to be, comfortably in your home clothes. And now you're juggling the communication with classmates and the energy that that can expend, particularly for someone who's more introverted or who hasn't had practice, right? A lot of us as adults felt like going back in 5 days a week to see people was a lot of energy. Going to events was a lot of energy. That's been amplified for our students, that for many of them, they have a key developmental time for social interaction and executive functioning skills development was truncated, right? So we want to be aware of that we have to give them, our students, grace, but also have great expectations for them to build these skills in this time. One of the other things we see is that planning out their time to complete work is really difficult, because if they are suddenly having so many activities plus commuting plus being in a classroom, the energy expenditure once they get home is much is much more during the day, right? Now, this may seem like, oh, wow, that was a year ago. We're in a totally different place. We're not. We're seeing that the top areas academically that students are seeing the most impact are writing skills, math skills, and world languages, right? Because so many of those are scaffolding, and we're building up those skills. The other thing we're seeing is that from a socialization perspective, students are really impacted in how they're socializing, how they're making friends, how they're impacted by changing social dynamics, because again, that day-to-day practice wasn't there for a very key part. And one of the schools that I'm consulting with this year, we're seeing specifically where students were when they started the pandemic, when the pandemic started, grade level, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, really impacted them in terms of their ability to develop independence and build these skills. So I think, Allia, that classroom norms, you're seeing that so much too, right?
Absolutely. So I wanted to just share, we just started at Santa Clara last week. It was our first week. And before the quarter began, I had a record number of students email me eagerly excited to begin the class and learn material in advance of the quarter, which is it's really amazing. It was a record number for me in over 10 years of teaching at the college level to have students email me before the quarter even began, asking to meet, asking to discuss what we were going to be reading the first week of class. And on Monday, when I started the class, that eagerness, that buzz was in the room. Students were so excited to be back, and fall is my favorite time of year as well because of the start of school. And then I teach Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. When I got to Friday, the energy was deflated in the room. And part of that was really just this eagerness to be back in person fully and to be part of every activity and involved in every aspect of school life, but also the challenges around how long things really take us and how draining each activity is. So like Anna was talking about in terms of time management around just the realities of being in person again and all of the tasks that are involved in that, I found that students needed a little bit more support around building out their day to complete all of the tasks that they needed. And then also setting realistic expectations for themselves around what they could do in terms of social activities. So because many of the in-person activities are finally now back, or finally scheduled back again, there's this desire to be involved in everything. And I think that's why we witnessed sort of a drain in the energy come Friday. And so really giving grace to ourselves and to the students, like Anna was saying, I think is so critical, but also talking through how long each task is going to take, what to expect, being understanding of, just what it's like to be in a classroom all day again, and what that takes out of your energy and the time needed to sort of restore, like quiet time that's necessary at the end of the day, I think is huge for high school students, really, so that they can recoup that energy as well.
Right. So one of the things, how can we help students thrive in high school? So our goal is about helping students develop what we call their own blueprint for success. So what I mean by that is that every student is individual who walks in my office, and every student I've worked with over the last 20 years is unique and personalized. And our approach should be for all of our students personalized. So oftentimes I'm always asked, about from parents who are really concerned about college admission. So I'm just going to bring it out there right now, because they always say, okay, well, what does my child need to do? And I always say the best way to have the most options that are appropriate for you is really to look at the high school experience and have the best possible high school experience and build these skills. So it's not about what do I need to do to get to college? It's really about, let's just focus on this high school program and this high school experience. And the first step is really to reflect and assess where your child is. And what I'm going to talk about here is their routines and systems. Okay. So what often happens is that when students get to high school, particularly if middle school was easier for them, elementary school was easier for them, or things come easy to them, or they're very charming and are able to talk their way out of things, that there is a heightened level of expectation of work. You are expected to get work done. You are expected to juggle different tasks. And we don't always give students the skills and how to do that, right? So thinking about how do they organize themselves, right? Do they have binders? How do they organize their computer or their Chromebook? Are they able to find every document in under a minute? That is my sort of my litmus test, right, of your organization. How is their planning? Do they create daily to-do lists of all their assignments? And then are they able to prioritize? So figure out what's first, second, third, fourth. Are they able to figure out how long and estimate things will take? Now, some students who are neurodiverse may have been diagnosed with ADHD, may experience something that we know as time blindness, where they have a really hard time figuring out how long things can take, and they can get hyper focused on something and it can end up taking hours, right? When really the assignment meant to be 20 to 30 minutes maximum. So when we're thinking about reflecting and assessing on where our children are, when we think about the executive functioning piece, we're thinking about their organization, their planning, their prioritization. Are they able to start tasks and complete them in a timely fashion without outside assistance? And what is their problem solving when something doesn't go as planned, right? What are the things that they can work on so that if something doesn't, like maybe they don't get a part in the play, or what are the things that they can think about? Now, that's one piece of it. The routine, the systems, all of those things. Those are really important. The second piece is the social, right? And what I mean by that is community. So I'll give you an example. Right now, a lot of the high school seniors I'm working with, they're applying to college, and there is a question on community. What different types of communities do you belong to? Now, this can be a tricky question, or it can be an easy question, right? My goal for all of our students is that they have multiple clusters of connection, or multiple circles of community. And what I mean by circles of community is this, that you have friends that might be your extended relatives, your cousins. They might be people from karate. They might be people from your religious institution. They're all different places, right? And maybe they don't overlap, but you feel like there's multiple places where you feel some sense of belonging. And what's most important to me here is that students have like places they feel a sense of belonging. Now, it's most important specifically when students are going through school and the social dynamics change, which is natural evolution of development, right? Your friends from third grade might not be the closest friends in 9th and 10th grade, and that's okay. They may be, but the data on that is pretty small. But we want students to be able to reach out to multiple places and feel connected. And the last is this piece around emotional health. So emotional wellness and emotional well-being. And the fundamental piece there is sleep. So here's what often happens by the time students go through high school. Sleep is the first thing to go, where it's really the fundamental. When I think about the organization, the planning, prioritizing, being able to complete work, being able to be focused, sleep is important. If you're not able to sleep, your brain is tired, things take longer, you're not able to concentrate. From a social dynamic, you're more apt to have outbursts or just be upset. And we know that those are the things that challenge social drama and dynamics, right? And then from the emotional aspect, we know that sleep is an incredible detoxifier of emotional stress, right? So think about it this way. When you go to sleep, right, and you've had a very stressful day, that sleep detoxifies. That's why when you wake up, you feel less stressed. You know, I was working on a book recently, and a lot of times I would get a headache by the end of the day, and I knew staying up late would get me nowhere, but going to bed early and getting up the next day once the headache was gone and hydrating was really important. So I think at this stage, the most important thing is to really reflect and assess on where your child is, and what are the skills that, you know, they can use support on as they're building, you know, their great high school experience. Leah, do you have stuff that you want to chime in on?
I really wanted to highlight how belonging is so critical for young students, and especially as students are graduating high school and moving into college, and having high school students develop skills around creating community and belonging in multiple types of communities or multiple spaces of community is so critical, because once they do get to college, that happens at a far more rapid pace. So high school is a great place to test out and try out new activities and to create spaces of belonging as well. And I think empowering the students to seek out communities and also to create them themselves.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we can also think about is communities where maybe they're working somewhere, right? Maybe they have a job outside where it's people of different generations that they're working with. That's the other thing that we found. The data is showing that more and more kids that are in high school have just friends that are in their peer group. Whereas really in the past generations, we've had so many intergenerational, you had your grandparents nearby, or you had an aunt and uncle. So you had relationship or a trusted family friend. So thinking about, where is your child just from a sense of executive functioning, from a sense of social, from a sense of emotional in this piece. And then when we think about those three things, the other piece to think about is, where is it helpful for us to put support systems in place? Knowing that, no one place can give us all the support we need, right? So again, parents, I was talking to a parent yesterday who was very honest and saying, I think we've done all we can do in terms of supporting our child. We need outside resources, right? And so your high school is a great place for those resources, right? Parent communities are great places for those resources. So thinking about those pieces as they're navigating this next piece. So the next idea is this idea of identify a cadence of communication. So you may live with your children, you may see them every day. You may not. You may see the children in your life on the weekends or everybody's family is different. What I want to think about here is how we really open up time and space to communicate with our children in a way that's not 24/7 about certain topics. So back to the, how are you doing in high school? Are you doing all your homework? What are you thinking about college? Like all of those things tend to weigh on students. So some of the most fraught topics, right? I often encourage families to think about what is the consistent time or the consistent space or the consistent place, particularly outside of the home, that you could do it. Maybe it's on drives. Maybe it's at a brunch at a coffee shop that you do once a month or something like that. Maybe it's on a hike. You go on hikes or you go on family hikes. Maybe it doesn't have to be weekly, but if you could carve out a half an hour a week, it can make a big difference. And then you can just sort of like parking lot topics, right? Like, hey, like instead of talking about it 24/7 and becoming stressful, let's choose the time and place and have the student think about that with you as well. And our focus here around cadence of communication is on collaborating with your child to focus on safety and well-being. What I mean by that is this: a lot of students are spending an inordinate amount of time online, right? The latest data has them spending over 9 hours on some form of screen outside of homework time, right? So they might be listening to music, they might be answering text messages, they might be doing all these things, but they're certainly having an information overload from the outside world, and they're having critical conversations with lots of people. I remember a couple of years ago, I was at a public school in the Bay Area doing an in-person talk before the pandemic. And this mom said, well, I just don't understand, before when I was growing up, there was a phone line and, people called our phone. And then why is it so different than my child having all of these, different ways they're communicating in their phone? And I said, well, yeah, but when one person called your house, that's one person, and you might have call waiting. So that might be a thing, but you're really only talking to one person. Now you could be simultaneously having text messages with 15, 17 different conversations. You could be having DMs, group chats, all of these things are information coming to your child. So understanding this whole piece around communication isn't just communication between you and your child, is understanding all the different ways that your child is getting messages from different sources, often in ways that are silent to you as the parent or caregiver, because you don't see all the text messages maybe, or you don't hear all the different ways they're going online, or, you can get Instagram messages, you can get snaps, you can get messages via text message, you can get WhatsApp, that's just 4, right? There's so many ways students are getting different, and it's becoming overwhelming for them, right? So to that point, I also encourage parents with this cadence, and caregivers with this cadence of communication, to think about this. Whereas parents often complain to me that they're really upset that their child is on their phone all the time, those same parents and caregivers are very upset if their child doesn't text back within 30 seconds. So think about what that modeling looks like, right? And think about what your norms as a family are, from a place of how am I communicating in person with my child in a way that's authentic, and ideally outside of the house for some of the hard conversations. Having those safe spaces that you go to that can be reoccurring can set up the time so that when you go home, you've left the conversation. And yeah, Allia, do you want to hop into?
Yeah, I think moving outside of a communication pattern that is solely transactional, and as a parent, I get caught in this as well a lot. I have a son, and I will often ask him at the end of his day, what did you learn in school today? And I'll get short one-word responses. And so I think reminding myself a lesson that I've learned as an educator, one of the earliest lessons I learned as a teacher was with facilitating discussion in the classroom and being okay with the quiet, and allowing the quiet to be a space where students were generating their thoughts and thinking through things, and just sort of sitting with that quiet for a little bit without having to sort of fill that space. I think about that with my son, of if I ask him the question of what he learned at school today, I often will get like a one-word response, right? But if I approach it in a totally different way, that's not this transactional of expectation of I'm asking him the specific question, I'm gonna get a response, but I really am okay with the quiet with him, or we go on a hike, or he's very young, so he's very into Legos right now, or I participate in Lego building with him, I will get a lot of information about what's happening in terms of the social landscape of kindergarten that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten from just that question of what did you learn in school today? And I know that the example with my son is very small because he's only in kindergarten, but I think about how my own memories of my parents when I was in high school, and they often asking me, well, what's your homework? When are your tests? What'd you get on your paper? Like those kinds of transactional questions, versus when we would go for hikes as a family. We loved walking at Rancho San Antonio pretty often. And I look back at those weekend hikes as incredibly important for my mental well-being, my physical well-being, but also it created this space where I could have a conversation with my parents that didn't feel like I was being questioned, but could really be open. And so I think all of those tips around how we communicate and how we approach a conversation, I think is really critical.
Great, thank you. The other piece to think about as we move forward with students is how do they identify sources of support? So this is an area where I find for a lot of students is tricky, because we have taught so much about grit and resilience and all of those things and they're not bad qualities necessarily, but it sometimes encourages students to think that they need to go it on their own, that there's this rugged individualism. And our goal really in the work that we do is how do we build community around building these skills? So one of the things that was brought up in my bio is that I have a nonprofit and we bring in these executive functioning things into schools, and we create this environment where all students are building these skills. So it's not just about, get yourself organized so you do really well in school, but it's also about how can we help each other. And to that point, it's like, how do students identify, A, when they could use extra support, B, that looking out for support isn't a sign of weakness, that it's a sign of strength and courage, and really an opportunity to raise their abilities beyond themselves, right? The research is fascinating on this, by the way. Research shows that when students study in groups, they actually tend to do better overall. Now, the key is knowing who to study with, when to study, right? We have people that are distracting and people that are energizing and people that are draining, but really identifying where and how you feel supported, right? And so when we think about what's available within the high school community, there's academic support, right? So many teachers have office hours. The counseling center offers peer tutoring often. And every school is different, and there's many different names for different things. So if your student is new to high school, my experience is in the first 3 months, if you can gamify them learning about the different sources of support, it allows them to have it in the back of their mind for when they need to reach out, right? So the one thing to think about is, like, there are opportunities for movement and exercise. There are so many, every school has some form of no-cut sport generally that can provide movement. There are PE classes. There are career and exploration opportunities. So the high schools really do have a lot of great resources, and a lot are funded by things like the foundation, which is amazing. The other thing, and there's a typo here, I'm so sorry, but the other thing is it's okay to outsource, right? So that's where you as the parent or caregiver can't be the be all end all, right? You might not have taken calculus or upper level math, and that's okay, right? Or you may not, even if you have, honestly, you may not be the person to have that conversation with your child, because your parent-child dynamic will end up with you all in, anger. So I always say that the goal of, in the high school experience is to maintain a really positive relationship with your child. And so grades and scores and tests and stuff, that should not be the center of your relationship. That being said, if there are places that you can outsource, right? And that doesn't mean necessarily spending money. So I want to make sure that we know that. There are lots of free resources. Our public libraries are great resources, right? There are, again, peer tutoring that can be free or low cost. And then it could even be like an extended family friend or a peer or whatever. But again, reaching out for help, right? And then seeing what kind of support is available. And I think this really ties into, again, what Allia wants to say about college, because if students don't know how to identify that they need help and be aware of that, and then identify where they can get that help early, it really impacts them when they get, to a college experience.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with these students coming into my classroom in the past couple of years around their ability to have conversations around mental health in particular. And I feel like they've really been driving a larger public conversation on the priorities around mental health, which has been really important. And just today it was announced at Santa Clara that all students would have access to the app Headspace, which is a great, it's an example of finding a resource that provides meditation or other sorts of support. But this skill around finding a support system that is not you as a parent, I think, is really, really important as a gift to your child to sort of help them find, and it goes back to the larger conversation on multiple communities of belonging and how important that is for their growth, in addition to sort of their mental health and general well-being. Being able to locate sources of support and a network, which at a high school there are both in and outside of a high school, many resources that can become available, will be so essential as a skill to develop.
The next thing to really think about is encouraging shared experiences with people from different backgrounds. And this seems like, self-evident in communities such as the Bay Area, which are in a lot of ways very diverse. And so your exposure to people from different backgrounds and and having shared experiences and understanding is really amplified. Again, one of the things that I do is I travel to schools and communities around the country, much more so before the pandemic, but still now. And I will say that we are very lucky in the Bay Area to have this. But one of the things that we want students to leave high school with, in addition to this sense of systems and routine and this sense of community in that way, is really their own perspective that comes from exposure and shared experiences with others, right? So exposure to new ideas, one of the things that I noticed, I went back for my newest book that's coming out next year, and I interviewed my former students from 15 to 20 years ago. So these are young adults who are in their 30s, and we talked about the skills they built when they were in high school, and also what are the things that they're using today. And one of the things that was really apparent to me is a lot of those students had different things that had changed in their life, right? They had given something up, like maybe an activity, they had outgrown it. But what that did was it expanded their opportunity for something new and different that they would have never even considered before. So when I think about this, when I think about high school and this opportunity to create a great high school experience, one of the things I think about is how can we provide students the opportunity for exposure for different people, places, things that may be outside of their comfort zone, but maybe taking a healthy risk. And how do we also do that in a way that gives them shared experiences with, again, people that have different perspectives from them, may have a different upbringing, may have a different background. One of the things we find as the most successful for adults is this idea of being a floater. So the idea of being comfortable in very different communities where you feel comfortable talking to people no matter where. And that's another skill that a lot of students will get if they work at a job that they face the public. They work with the public. Say you work at a coffee shop, or you work, at one of the students is working at a food bank as their side job. So thinking about where are the ways that they can get this exposure and shared experiences with others who have different backgrounds than them, because that also makes, the high school experience more rich and interesting, right? Different perspectives, different openings, different opportunities, but also takes this narrow vision of success that often happens when all of your friends have the same background than you and the same activities and the same classes and the same thing. You have a very narrow definition of what success looks like, right? And what I'm finding for a lot of our students is that if we don't encourage this expansion of perspective, that some of this narrowing definition of success can be really stifling and overwhelming.
I think that this is also a really great opportunity for parents to model their own exposure to experiences and people from other backgrounds as well. It's a great opportunity for parents to reflect upon like their own social landscape as well, and to see how they're modeling for their children interactions and exchanges, especially considering the space in which we all live.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think back to that modeling, everything to build off that idea of modeling, it's not just, your own friendships and your own ability to be inclusive and bring other people under a very big tent that is your parent community or your school community, or how do you make other people feel welcome? There's always parents that may be new to your community. How do you reach out and proactively, right? How do you create that inclusive environment, right? We know that middle school, there's research out there that middle school moms are the most stressed out demographic of parent. Part of it is because of the changing social dynamics. So when we think about how we model, how do we ourselves say things that are kind, be inclusive, be welcoming to people that may, come to a parent event and not know anyone, right? Rather than speaking to all the people that we know. The thing that we have seen around these shared experiences is that we build our friendships that then create not just stronger ties, right? The stronger ties are the close friendships. The research shows that on average, Americans have about 2 to 3 stronger ties. We also want students to build those weaker ties, right? People they say hello to, that they're friendly to, that they may not do anything on the weekends with or, outside of school, but they then feel a sense of camaraderie. Because long term, the research, the more interactions you can have, just saying hi in the hallway, inviting somebody to lunch, all of those things contribute to the overall social and emotional wellness. The last thing is actually for our parents. And the reason we bring this up is joining parent groups can be incredibly helpful to get a diverse perspective and to also hear about other people's experiences. Maybe they have older children than you. Maybe they've gone through certain experiences. How do you build your network within your school community and then within your greater community to get involved at a way that feels comfortable for you, right? Some of you may work many jobs or many hours. So we're not trying to create a big time commitment, but also thinking about how can you also model this form of connection across parent communities. The one thing I'll say is that there's many ways to stay connected, right? As you saw at the beginning of this presentation with the Fremont Union Foundation, like there's many ways that they offer for you to stay connected, but there are many ways online and in person that you can connect with other parents. Again, to get this, and caregivers, to get this perspective, right? There's might be a parents club at or caregivers club at your school. There may be all of these different avenues for you to meet new people. One of the things that I give as an activity for students when they start a new school and they feel kind of alone is I gamify the idea of meeting new people, right? So I say, okay, so introduce yourself to 1 to 3 new people each week. You don't have to become best friends with them, but you do have to have a conversation that goes beyond, hi, my name is, and maybe a 2 to 3 minute conversation. A lot of times students, especially coming out of the pandemic, especially starting a new school, the piece that's hard is that icebreaker, that first conversation. So nobody wants to break the ice. And so helping students identify this by modeling it yourself, right? Practicing it yourself is also super helpful. So that's where I say, so that idea of what I say with students, 1 to 3 students or classmates, right, that you can have a conversation with that you might not otherwise. I give that same challenge in the same monthly version. So 1 to 3 parents, maybe that you haven't met, maybe go to an event, maybe connect online with other adults in the community that can be good resources for you, and you can be good resources for them. Anything to add, Allia?
Well, I really connect to this though as a parent personally, that the connections that I've been able to make, I was primarily able to make through volunteering at my son's school. So I found a volunteer opportunity that I was able to work around my work schedule. And it was in that space where I was able to actually build connections with other parents that have been really meaningful and have been helpful to my experience as a parent. So I highly recommend volunteering if you're able to.
Right. And finding something that works for you, right? Mm-hmm. There's many different ways to engage. So don't feel like you need to do something that's really uncomfortable, or that you find something that you enjoy that uses your experiences or helps you build, new skills. So with that, I mean, we really want to focus on how do you help your student have a great high school experience? And the one thing that students think about the most is when we think about adults, right? They remember the social experiences, the community. So when we think about the routines and the executive functioning skills, we're helping them build community. When we're thinking about expanding perspective, we're helping them build community through exposure and shared experiences. When we're thinking about having them let go of that narrow definition of success through building these skills, focusing on the social, emotional, and the executive functioning, we're going beyond the original piece of transactional, socializing transactional academic experiences to help them build their own blueprint. So with that, I want to make sure that we have time for questions. It looks like we have a few. I think Charlene is going to come and join us as we ask them. Yeah. Or as we ask them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna and Allia, for all that great advice. My own children are young adults, but I know listening to you two that everything you're saying makes complete sense. Now, let's dive into what really happens with some of the kids, okay? Again, all really, really good advice. Thank you so much. You've been talking about social interactions. Parent asks, okay, advice like join a club or try out for the school play works great if your child is an extrovert. What do you suggest for our introverted teenager?
Well, there's a lot of ways that introverts can, first of all, introverts need more time to regroup, right? So we want to make sure that we're mindful of energy expenditure, but there's a lot of ways that they may find that work well for them. So it might be, an activity that is one-on-one. It might be volunteering, as a tutor, maybe one-on-one versus like a big group experience. It may be helping out with, like, in terms of the play, for some kids, it might be background, right? Doing a certain thing. Maybe it's doing costumes. Maybe it's doing makeup. Maybe it's doing all these things. So helping students figure out where and how they want to participate in a way that honors who they are as a person is really important. Activities at sports, to be honest, some of the sports are more geared towards people who want to have those one-on-one interactions. Tennis, running, swimming, those are all great activities. And again, some of those are no cut depending on what school you're at. So you could participate, your child could participate in them and be part of a team. Yet when you're running, you have this team experience, but you have this individual experience.
I was absolutely thinking about lights and scene design for theater, how that would be a really amazing opportunity for an introverted student to develop community in a smaller space. The group that does the lights and the scene design, it's like a smaller group, right? But also get to be part of this larger community, and putting on a school play is like really, really phenomenal. It's just, I think students really enjoy that experience. But that is a type of activity that is like not a lot of people know about, or not a lot of people think about immediately, right? It's not one of the big ones, but there's lots of different opportunities on campus that will allow for a student to have like those smaller settings. And also speaking to a guidance counselor on campus about that, speaking to some teachers about what they recommend would be really helpful too.
The key is really understanding that there are lots of different opportunities that can be tweaked to be appropriate for every child. And that's the whole concept of building your own blueprint, right? So figuring out what that looks like. And, I have one student who started a reading club with 5 of her friends, and they read different books that are really exciting. And they get in hammocks on the weekends, and that's what they do.
I love that advice, Anna and Allia. And parents, you are the expert in your own child. And as Anna is saying, we need to help our kids find their own blueprint for success. They need to find their own blueprint for success, right? Okay, speaking of sports and clubs, here's a good one. What should you do if your child tries out for an activity, sports, clubs, music, immerses themselves in it, then decides it's not for them? The student then feels like they wasted their time. How do you help them not feel regret? And how do you help them move on? I think that's a great question.
So this is a student that's played a sport. I want to make sure I get the question.
They tried out an activity, whether it be sports, club, or music, really got into it, then decided it wasn't for them.
Well, the thing is that I think we also need to change our messaging. I think a lot of our messaging is like, you need to stick with something for 12 years. And if you don't, that's a failure. But I think the failure is not trying something new and being able to objectively say, hey, you know what? That's not for me. Or, oh, wow, I didn't know that I was going to really like that. Or, you know what? That was great, but I don't need to do that again. I did it once. And all of those are successes. So I think, first of all, we need to reframe what success looks like, right? And I think we as parents can do that with the messaging of, you tried. And then I also think the second thing is have them look back at something that didn't work out in their life. They didn't make the soccer team, whatever, something that didn't work out. And then all of the things that came out of that after that didn't work out. Because sometimes what is helpful is to have that longer view of like, and maybe you as a parent can model that too, right? Maybe say something in your life didn't work out, and you can say, hey, this didn't work out as planned. And here's all the things that happened because they didn't work out as planned. And not all will be positive, but we can focus on some of the things that have been positive that come out of it. But again, I think much of this is around our reframing. There's no wasted time if we have experienced, and at the very least, we experience that is not something we want to spend our time on long. Because, I'll give you an example. I had a student who really thought they wanted to be an architect. And they were like, architect, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, well, look, take a couple of beginning classes before you devote your life and all your applications to architecture. And they did. And that was super helpful because they realized they didn't understand what being an architect or the true architecture world was. And they said, oh, I'm much more suited to this, something else. And so looking at high school as this time of experience, I mean, one of the most important things that I always go back to is people who, Lisa Belkin, who wrote for the New York Times, she once told me that people who love their jobs, their careers the most, started out as something they like to do in middle school and high school. So simply the idea that you can identify what you like and don't like is really important. And I feel like it's getting lost in this transactional grades, test scores, college admission. We have to celebrate that kids can try things and they might not work out. And that may lead to something that does even better than they imagined.
Yeah, I think a real skill that can be derived from the experiences that don't work out is articulating reflection around those experiences. I think obviously as we become adults, we become experts, I hope, at like silver linings because we go through lots of processes that don't work out. That's just part of life, right? But working through articulating for ourselves and others what we enjoyed and what we didn't enjoy and working on, getting to places where we want to do. I think it's where we want to be doing things. I think what Anna was just saying about like moving away from this transactional lens of thinking that time is wasted is so critical, right? I think that's a real big gift that we can give to our students is having them see that even when things don't work out, there was something that they took away from that experience that they can move forward with.
Really good point. It's not time wasted. If you're figuring out what you want to do, you've got to figure out what you don't want to do. So good point, Allia and Anna. So lots of great questions coming in. We have time for a few more. Here's one that I think every parent can relate to. Question: how do you advise giving kids input on navigating high school when they're most influenced by what their friends do and want to do exactly the same thing?
So I'm going to push back on that because parents underestimate their role in kids' learning and development and how they really process. So they're going to tell you that they are not listening, but the reality is they are taking in all that you're saying and you're doing, and specifically you're doing. So if you're saying get off your phone, but you're on your phone 24/7, they see that, right? But if they also see, I think this is really helpful, if they see you being a kind and generous part of the community, they see that. And that's so much more powerful than you telling them in some ways to be that. But I think that what is really helpful for parents to how to approach this as a parent or caregiver is to ask kids what their friends are doing or what their peers are doing or what feels uncomfortable that they've seen, because they want to talk about that. And using the lens of their friends gives them a safety from then not being able to call it out to themselves. So I think a lot of times parents assume like this is very common, like they just want to do what their friends are. Well, they know their friends have like little knowledge on some of the topics of the day, right? But they also don't want to admit how much they still need their parent and caregivers and how much they're looking to you as even just support, of just a hug, of just I don't have the answers, but I want to listen. I can't solve your problem, but I want to be here. Let's have a cup of tea or cocoa or something, or just sit, or a really important one is a lot of times kids, especially coming back from the pandemic, sitting down to do work is hard. So even if a parent can just sit next to them and read a book or read the paper or do their own work or write a letter, whatever, just that idea of, in ADHD world, we call it body doubling. There's a second person there to help you be accountable. But that's that quiet support that you as a parent can give that means the world. And they are looking to you. They just don't want to admit it. I see it all the time. And last thing I'll say around that is that a lot of times I have kids use their parents as or caregivers as the scapegoat. So oh, I'm so sorry, I can't be online too late because my mom or my dad or my, aunt or whoever, or grandma, whoever I live with, doesn't allow me to be. So allowing you to be sort of the fall person is super helpful for them to also have an escape mechanism when things, may feel uncomfortable. I wanted to quickly say that I'm doing with one of my colleagues and organizing the college application process next week. It's online and it's free, and it's for those of you who may need support around thinking about how do you help your child. It's a different process than high school, but I thought it might be a good reference for some families.
Thank you so much. So we have just a few minutes together, and I want to honor everyone's time and Anna's time and Allia's time. So both of you ladies, I would like to give you a minute each to just summarize one piece of advice that you really want people to go away from with tonight. So Allia, let's start with you.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks for being here this evening and joining us. I think one of the things that I really want to highlight for parents is that high school is an amazing time to develop these skills that will serve your students as they grow into young adults. And so thinking about what are those skills that you want them to have, and, around communication, time management, communication with peers, prioritizing tasks, reflection, all of that, and think about the ways that you can help them support those practices in a high school setting, I think would be really important.
It's really lovely. Thank you, Allia. And I really also love that you include reflection as one of the things that we need to help teach our kids. Anna, how about you? Final words.
I think we think about our high school experience and our experiences in the form of, work, rest and reflection, it can also be really helpful in thinking about and work. So in the reflection piece, so work can include movement, but also can include schoolwork, right? But that we all have this time to do that work, and that when it takes time and energy, we have time for rest that's not just sleep, right? And that provides us this opportunity that Allia said around reflection, because our students are going to create, I always say, my job is really just as a coach. I ask questions. I feel like the students have better answers than I could ever have it for themselves. And our job as adults in their world is just to be a guide, right? So with that, I think that is really, I'm so glad you all could join us tonight. And thank you to Parent Venture and the Fremont Union Parent Group and the Foundation for having us. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Anna Homayoun and Allia Griffin. My favorite thing are these new reaction emojis. I love them. And we really want to most thank all of you who joined us tonight, and our sponsor, Fremont Union High Schools Foundation, for letting us be here. So again, take care, everyone. Good night. This video will be available soon, and we hope that you will share it with your friends and family. Take care, everybody. Hope to see you again soon. Good night.